scripts in writing, in cold, analytical black and white, this incident will make some sense. I've had time now, 1 month of time to seek the answer. I saw it happen and I traced its origin. I only hope I can reconstruct this strange affair in some semblance of order. The story of John Davis. It was one of those somber, rainy June days so typical of New England. I was in my study, examining the work of one of my most promising students, when another member of my art class called on the telephone. There was an urgency in the voice of Margaret Lawrence that I couldn't ignore. After all, Johnny Davis was also an advanced student of mine. You're sure he's in his room?
I know he is. He's been there for almost a week. I've watched his window.
And since his return from his trip, you haven't heard from him?
Not a word. And that's what frightens me so, Professor. Johnny has those strange, introspective moods of his often. But he's always come out of them for me.
And you don't know where he went for those 2 weeks?
He wouldn't tell me. We had a date for dinner and he never showed up. I came here looking for him, and his landlady told me he'd packed his bags and driven away. Johnny wouldn't do that. Not if his mind was...
You're fond of that boy, aren't you, my dear?
Yes.
And you find it difficult to love a man you don't understand. I'm not sure I understand either, Margaret. I've observed that boy in class. I've studied him as much as any art professor can, with a constant handful of brushes and a mouthful of words. He's a sick boy. He needs help.
And you're the only one who can help him. He admires you more than anyone, I think.
May I say, a rarity in my classroom. Well, let us hope my intercession proves fruitful. Stay here until I return. But don't expect any miracles.
Who is it?
Johnny, it's Professor Bannister. May I come in? Well, my boy, you're not encouraging one of my usually charming and loquacious entrances.
I'm sorry, Professor.
May I sit down? Well, did you enjoy your trip?
Trip?
Why, yes. We've missed you in class, Johnny. Let's see, it's been 3 weeks, hasn't it?
I don't remember.
You realize, of course, my boy, that you've been the inspirational force.
I have.
Ah, yes. Without you, the entire class seems to disintegrate. Lacks cohesion. That's why it's always gratifying to have a superior talent on one side.
Me?
You.
Why are you here? What do you want from me?
Your life, Johnny. We want your life.
We? You mean Margaret sent you here?
Who has a better right? She loves you, Johnny.
What does she love? A shadow? A flightless bird? A tree without roots?
She loves Johnny Davis.
I went home, Professor. After 15 years, I went home.
Tell me about it.
It isn't the same. Nothing's the same. In class, I see you, Professor. I see Margaret. But you aren't there. She isn't. Nothing is there. All my life it's been silence and shadow of losing the way. Do you know what it means to be completely surrounded by yourself? To be the only one that exists?
I do, my boy. We all understand that at times. Tell me about your trip.
I went home.
Of silence and shadow, of losing the way. What did he mean? Was going home losing the way? I didn't know where home was then. Maybe I still don't know.
The signposts were the same. I knew where home was.
Why did you leave?
I remember a windmill. Its blades seemed to turn in rhythm with my dreams.
A windmill. A strange object to remember. A lake, a mountain, a corner drugstore, but why a windmill?
The blades were gone.
What of your home? Your family, Johnny?
I told Pa the house was running down. Ma told him too. Let it go, he says. With that muley young'un I'm raising now, it don't make no difference.
The old homestead, run down, abandoned. Perhaps that was my first and my only clue. But that couldn't be all.
Pa was right.
There were times, weren't there, Johnny?
I don't think Pa would have let the boat go that way. It was the only thing he cared for.
Were beginning to fit together. A house and a boat. Two relics of the past that was Johnny Davis. I knew then what I had to do. To live in the past is to perish in the present. He had to know It was happening to him.
Johnny boy. I know, son, but that's all in the past. Forgotten.
Forgotten? Is Karen forgotten?
Karen?
I found her, Professor. After 15 years.
Who is Karen?
After 15 years. At Provincetown, I told Mr. Pfeiffer it was her. He couldn't remember. I told him this was the girl I loved more than any other. It was her picture of herself.
It was her painting of herself, he said. A work that somehow got buried behind the others. His mere mention of this painting convinced me that the enigma that was John Davis had a deeper significance.
Johnny, Heinrich Pfeiffer is one of Provincetown's most famous artists. I know him well.
It was Karen's picture, just as she was. In her self-portrait, she had captured every highlight, every facet of her beauty. Beauty. Change, Professor. Must everything change?
She brought you back. Did Karen bring you back?
There had to be something, someone there never has been.
Margaret is that someone.
Margaret is gone.
No, she's here. She's the present and the future. Karen is the past.
Nobody knew where she was. The girl in the cottage didn't know.
Nobody knew where she was. At that moment, I suddenly became aware of Karen. Not the painting, the so-called self-portrait, but the person. I had to know more.
How did you find Karen?
I didn't.
A moment ago, you said that you did. Where was she, Johnny?
There was sand. clean white sand and sea.
Where was she, Johnny?
Why did I go back?
I have tried mightily to somehow crystallize a mental image of what transpired on that lonely stretch of beach. Whatever or whoever it was had profoundly altered the existence of 3 people.
Why don't you go, Professor? Go on, get out. I don't want any more talk. Tell Margaret, no more talk.
Of course there'll be no more talk. I know what's wrong, Johnny. There wasn't any Karen. She never existed. Forget
I knew I should have kept you out of here. There's really no understanding in you, is there? Like all the rest, you must see to believe. Is that it? And take a good, long look.
Oh, it's a nice, innocuous thing.
Do you see, Professor? In that, my whole miserable life.
Why, of course, my boy, it's a monstrosity. It's nothing but a horrible monstrosity.
And you do see, just as I do. Now you realize why, Professor. Why I couldn't see anyone until I really knew that this distortion was real. It is real.
All things. Nothing. Margaret is outside.
Bring her in, please.
You're all right now? Thanks to you, Professor.
It's good to have you back, darling.
I'll never go away again.
Well, miss, whatever you are, you've done enough damage for one day. I'm about to spirit you away to the nearest trash receptacle.
Let me look at you, honey.
What a beautiful girl.
I will never forget that moment. As I turned my head from the painting on the floor and looked into the twisted, tortured mask that was now Johnny Davis, I realized that whatever small amount of good I had accomplished was now totally destroyed. It was the most completely unnerving experience of my life. The sight of a man going stark, raving mad. I have done all that I can for Johnny Davis. For 2 weeks, I have vainly searched the beaches and the dunes. Of the mysterious Karen, I have found neither sight nor sign. Did she exist? Is this really her picture? No one will ever know.